is the president?
Oklahoma president.
Oklahoma president of CrossFirst Bank. You probably know a lot more about the bank than I do, but it's a really successful bank, and they are really good at loaning. Right, you guys loan a lot of money out, do really good on returns, wealth of information just on banking. But Steve is very system oriented. He's really good at least this is my assessment. He's really good at helping people grow where they're planted. And Steve's had some ups and downs in his lives, and I wanted him to come tonight to share from that. But he's really familiar with the book Traction, and specifically the system EOS, which is what she's going to talk to you about. But a lot of what Gary said and a lot of what we do in real estate is we run it as a business, ideally. And I think a lot of these principles can be just applied to how we live our life and whatnot. But I'm hoping there's some solid nuggets for you guys tonight as we just try to be more efficient, more goal-orientated, and go after those big things. So, Steve, if you'll do your thing.
Right. Well, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. Good news is I don't have a whole lot to say. The bad news is what I do have to say isn't going to be near as interesting as what Gary just talked about, okay? So just hang with me for a little bit. Another famous Zig Ziglar quote. I'm a huge Zig Ziglar fan. And one of Zig's quotes was, you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. So it goes back to that giving away, right? And sharing what you have, whether it's your time, your talent, or your treasure, right? And the most important thing that every one of us have is time. Because time is not promised tomorrow. You've got today, you don't have tomorrow, right? You've got your talent, you've got your treasure, that goes with you. But time is one of those things that you can't get. Once it's gone, it's gone. So you thought I would visit with you about, and what Marty kind of asked me to talk to you about when he and I were first meeting, I was telling him that our bank, when I started at CrossFirst Bank as the market president, we have one location here in Oklahoma City over on Memorial Road between Meridian and MacArthur. We were, it was about $80 million in assets, and I've been with the bank almost 10 years now. We're close to $500 million now, and it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with all the people that I've been able to surround myself with. But more importantly, it's about setting goals and it's about planning. Benjamin Franklin's credited with the saying that if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail, right? And so it's really important to do that. Another quote that I really love, and this is over the top, really good. How many of you know Yogi Berra? Any of you old enough to know Yogi, baseball player? Yogi had a saying that if you don't know where you're going, you're going to end up someplace else. Let that sink in for just a little bit, right? So planning on where you want to go. I've got a handout that I'll give to you a little bit later if you want it. I know there's a few of you, and look, I think there he is back there, have read the book Traction. I don't know, how many have you read this book, Traction? So you guys you probably know more about it than I do. There's this other book that's a follow-up. It's called EOS. What the heck is EOS? EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. Every one of you are entrepreneurs here in this room. And so, the entrepreneurial system or traction, it starts with a grid with you or your company being in the middle. And it starts with your people, and then you've got your vision and data. Then down at the bottom, you deal with issues, and then you've got your processes, and then you've got traction. And so the EOS model is simply a tool for you to be able to understand where you are, where you're going, and then building a roadmap to get there and staying on track, okay? And so I thought what I would do is just go through the process real quick. I'm not going to go into all these different, these different components, but how many of you? Let me just ask you a quick question. How many of you have a business with employees? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, and then so the rest of you are individual investors or owners and things. The good thing about this model, you don't have to be a business to be able to follow it, because every one of us need to have a plan, and every one of us need to look in the mirror, understand who we are and where we're going, and where we're at right now. It also works. Marty and I were talking. He uses this for his family as well, and so I'm not going to go through the pieces because I don't know it's really applicable to everybody. But if you have not read the book Traction, I would encourage you to get it and look through it. But I want to talk about the strategy and the plan that the EOS model is all about. All right, and it starts with Gary kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, right? He's got a core set of values. You have to understand what your core set of values are, right? And nobody can define those except you, right? And then you have to stick to those core values and never deviate from those values. You've got to be true to yourself. So understanding what your core values are. Then you got to understand what your core focus is. Where are you going to be focusing? And within that piece, you've got to define what is your purpose, or what cause are you involved in, right? Or what's your passion? You heard Gary talk about, the things that, I heard him talk about investing and doing a lot of things and having some good deals and some bad deals. But what I heard is his passion about giving things away, right? Giving his time, his talent, his treasure away. That's what he's passionate about. That's what I think his purpose is. All the other stuff is just a means to be able to fulfill his purpose and what God has called him to do. And if you are a business owner or an investor, you understand what is your niche, right? What do you do that makes you unique? What makes you good? And so what is your niche that you're trying to follow through? So you got your core values, then you got to define your core purpose or your core focus. And then the next component of it is a 10-year plan. In a 10-year plan, nobody knows where you're going to be in 10 years, but if you sit down today and you think about where am I today, and I call them big, hairy, audacious goals, right? BHAG. Where do you want to be in 10 years, and dream big? What does that look like for you in 10 years? If you have a couple of rental properties now, and maybe you want to have 100, maybe you want to have 500 properties, right? Put it down. Define what that purpose is and that 10-year plan is, right? And that's where you got to put this down in the model, right? And then you got to figure out, especially if you're a business owner, okay, what's your marketing strategy? How are you going to get there, right? And so who is your target market, or what is your target industry? Where you go. So you make your list of who that is that you're trying to go to. Or if it's an investor, define what is the ideal type of investment that I want to make. Is it residential? Is it commercial? Whatever it is, define what that is. And then, as a business owner, you need to define 3 uniques. What makes you unique in doing what you do in your business? What sets you apart from your competition? And let me see here. I took some notes on this other one, make sure I don't miss anything here. What sets you apart from the competition? For us as a bank, we have a unique strategy. We don't have a branch on every street corner. We have one location in Oklahoma City, right? And so we have great technology. When our bank was first formed by 15 Christian businessmen back in 2007, they wanted to build a bank that was highly focused on the infrastructure and technology, but it wasn't going to be a branch-heavy bank. And then they wanted to invest heavily in people. They wanted to go find the best people. Not sure how I got through the door, but I got lucky, right? So that was what was unique about us. We were a privately held bank at the time. I remember when I started at the bank, I spent most of my time raising capital because we were growing so quickly. you know, the federal government, they kind of require that as banks you have enough capital to support your growth. So I spent a lot of my time telling the story about our bank and trying to go get people to write me $100,000, $250,000, $1 million check to invest in our bank. And what was really interesting about that is that, you know, when you sit down and you give somebody a prospectus or a pitch book and you're going through it and you're telling them, this is where we started, this is where we are, this is how we got there, and the returns that we were generating were pretty significant. You know, a lot of those folks said, you know, not only do I want to write a check and be part of this, I want to bank with you guys because, you know, how we approached banking, you know, providing extraordinary service. Somebody reached out to me today that's a contact on LinkedIn and said that they've got a hospice and a home health care business. They're headquartered out of Tulsa. And she mentioned a couple of banks that she's with, and she said, you know, they're not living up to their promises. They're not living up to what they said. You know, our founding CEO had a saying that, you know, when you make a promise, you create hope. When you keep a promise, you build trust. And in my business, it's all about building trust, building trusted relationships. And I'm sure a lot of you all in the businesses that you're in is the same thing. Everything in life centers around relationships, does it not? Your family, your friends, your church, your business, it all centers around relationships. And so for us, it was all about building trusted relationships. That was one of our uniques. You know, you've got to define your process. You know, what will your customers, what will they experience when they work with you, right? So you've got to be able to fully understand that as well. And then what's your guarantee, right? You got to put your money where your mouth is. For us, it was all about making and keeping promises and going back to that saying about building trust, okay? So you've defined your core values, you've defined what your focus is going to be, you've got your 10-year big, hairy, audacious goals out there, and then now you've developed your marketing strategy, you've identified your marketing strategy, you know, your target market, what makes you unique. So now we've got all these big ideas. Now we got to start bringing it in closer to home so we can define it, right? And so now from there you take and build your 3-year picture. You know where you want to be in 10 years. So if you have an idea of where you would like to be in 10 years, where do you have to be in 3 years to be on pace to get to where you want to be in 10 years? Okay? And so this is where you got to start defining some things a little bit more closely. And so for us, you know, it was, for us, it's like, what are your revenues? What are your profits? Whatever it is that defines you, and that gets back to that data that I was talking about on that wheel. You have to understand, you know, where you need to be and how you define success for yourself and for your company. And then you've got to put it down on paper, so you've got a target. You've got to define some measurables for yourself, right? And then you track those measurables by building a dashboard. And again, this is all very systematic, it's very process driven, but it helps you stay on pace. So you've got a 3-year plan, and now this is where the rubber hits the road. Now you got to bring it in and say, I know where I got to be in 3 years, so where do I need to be at the end of 1 year? So you've got to build a 1-year plan with those same metrics that we just talked about that you want to be in 3 years, right? You need to put those down, your whatever it is that works for you, you've got to build those out for 1 year. And so now you know this is where I need to be at the end of 1 year based upon your metrics and your company, and that'll help me be on track to be where I need to be in 3 years on your way to your big, hairy, audacious goals in 10 years, right? And now the important part is to identify your rocks. So the rocks are things that you've got to deal with, and you break these down into 90-day increments. So every quarter, you know, at the bank, we define our rocks. So we know where we want to be at the end of 1 year. So what are these things? And you've got to keep this to a minimum, right? No more than 7. I try to keep it to 3 to 5.
Can you explain the rock analogy from Steve Covey?
Well, I don't know if I know the rock analogy
Big
from...
rocks, little rocks, so forth, so on.
Yeah, I honestly, I've read some of Stephen Covey's stuff, but why don't you, Marty, why don't you come up and talk about that?
So in EOS, he's referring to rocks, but the analogy, I think it's Steve Covey that did it. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But he talks about if you guys have all probably seen the illustration. You have a jar, and if you put in all the sand first,
Oh, that's what you're going to
it fills up.
Yeah.
If you put the pebbles in, it fills up. But if you put the big rocks in first, then you can put the gravel, then you can put the sand, and then you can add water. And what Steve's getting at is, as a business, you have to identify your big rocks. They have to be your priority first and foremost.
Right.
And everything else comes after. I just wanted you guys to understand, just not just random rocks. But
Yeah, great point. So yeah, that I didn't know that's where you were going with the rock analogy, but yeah, you guys have probably seen the video on X or some of these other deals where a college professor starts with it, and he puts in rocks, he puts a bunch of rocks, the big rocks, fills it up, and he asks the students, "Is this full?" And they say, "Yeah, it's all full." So then he takes some smaller pebbles, and these pebbles kind of get into the crevices of where the big rocks weren't at, and he says, "Okay, now is it full?" And they say, "Yeah, it's full." Then he gets sand, and he pours sand in it, and then he puts sand in. Now is it full? And so the thing is, don't let the small things get in your way. You focus on those things, and that's what these rocks are, right? What are these things that are going to be an impediment to you being able to achieve where you want to be at the end of 1 year? You've got to identify those, and then you've got to deal with them. And part of the traction model, the EOS model, is I have a meeting every week with my team and then my boss, who's out of Kansas City. And it's an hour-and-a-half meeting. I know that sounds stupid. We do it every week. It's an L10 meeting. And one of the things we talk about, are you on track with your rocks or are you off track? And so you have to identify these rocks that can prevent you from achieving your year-end goal, right? And then, rocks you may not be the only one dealing with rocks. I've got a few employees that report up to me, and so I don't own all of my rocks. I have to assign some of the rocks. We all buy into it, right? And then we make sure that we stay on track. And so at the end of the 90 days, you've got to be thinking about the next 90 days. What are the rocks for the next 90 days? And at any rate, it just helps you stay on track and helps you keep focused to where you're wanting to be at the end of that year. Because again, you're thinking long term, but you got to keep it close term. And then the other big component are issues. There are always going to be issues that come up, and you've got to deal with the issues. Part of the model is IDS. You've got to define the issues. You've got to discuss the issues, and you've got to solve the issues, right? And so there are going to be things that come up that you don't plan for, and you've got to figure out how to deal with them. You've got to identify them, you got to discuss them, and then you got to figure out a solution to them, right? And so, this model, it might not work for everybody. I'll tell you, it's been very effective for us as a bank. It helps us stay on track, but it starts at first and foremost with creating the vision and identifying, where you want to be, and you got to what is your focus, your marketing strategy, your 10-year plan, your 3-year plan, and then you bring it down to the grassroots and you're dealing with it over a year. So, for me, I've done a couple of investments. I've owned 3 businesses in my time, and 2 of them went bad. And so I know what failure is all about as well. I'm a recovering CPA, and after those 3 businesses went bad, I had to go get a real job and I had to make some money. And that's when I got into banking about almost 25 years ago. And so mostly I've been in commercial banking. But this is something that just resonated with me when our CEO found it. Now, I went through it in about 15 minutes, and our executive leadership team spent 3 days going through what I just discussed for you, identifying it out, and then they rolled it down to the rest of the bank as well. So anyway, I don't know if it helps. For those of you that have done it, you might speak to it a little bit, but I've got these handouts for you if you're interested in taking it. But they are really good books, Traction, and then I really enjoyed this one here, What the Heck is EOS? And so I would encourage you to get this. And again, you don't have to be in a big business for it to make sense as well. I've not done any investment in real estate, but I've loaned a lot of money to folks investing in real estate. I think for me, being a recovering CPA, Mr. Conservative, I've learned the hard way. I had a restaurant. Yeah, that was one of the losers. Yeah, that didn't work so well. I wouldn't encourage anybody to be in the restaurant business. That's it. That's all I've got. So I told you it'd be a lot shorter. Anybody have any questions at all? Yes, sir.
Does the bank favor any specific types of loans?
You know, we don't. So we're all about relationships and driving relationships. You know, back in the old days when Gary was 9 years old and he went in to borrow some money for a couple of U's, right? First of all, he wasn't old enough to sign the contract. That's another story. But his dad had already made pre-arrangements, obviously, right? But that was a character loan, what we used to call as a character loan, right? And now there'll be bankers that say, yeah, well, you don't make character loans anymore. But I'll tell you, I don't make a loan. I never make a loan unless I understand who I'm loaning to and if I understand their character, right? You got to start with character. And so we know the people that we're loaning money to. We build that relationship. We spend a lot of time. And so we just have to understand the business, right? And if we can understand the business, and one of the things, again, that sets us apart is we've taken the time to do that. You know, 820 that's out selling, you know, solar panels, we've worked with those guys. Great character people, right? But you know what they appreciate about us is we spent the time to sit down and understand what they did. And what they do, he said, not many banks will do that. So if as a banker, if I can understand how you produce a widget and that you're selling that widget, how much you're selling it for, what does it cost you, who's your target audience, you know, is it a growing industry, is it a dying industry? There are a lot of things that banks look at. But now I will say our bank is mostly commercial driven. You know, we don't do a lot of we don't do any car loans, we don't do many house loans. So we are mostly a commercial-driven bank. We do a lot of investment real estate lending. We do commercial and industrial, manufacturing, service, you know, lots of different types of loans. So for us as a bank, it's really about the people. It's knowing who you're lending money to. Do they have experience? Have they ridden through those cycles before? So there's a lot that goes into play, but it starts with the person and it starts with the character. Yeah, as a matter of fact, we do. And again, so our model is if the person is here, or if the real estate or the business is here, we'll loan money to them. And once we get to know them, you know, we've lent money. We've got a client that, you know, bought some property up in Indianapolis, and we're in that deal. We've lent money to some folks that have some senior housing facilities in Utah, and so yeah, we've got loans all over the United States. We're not doing any office loans right now, so don't call me if you've got an office property you want. We're not doing that right now. That's one of the things that COVID did, is it wrecked the office space for sure. It's a great question though.
Do you do raw land loans?
We don't do much of it, and there better be a lot of equity going in, Gary. We don't do 100% raw land loans. And again, it gets back to the character and what's the purpose of it. We do have a lot of raw land. We've got some of the largest home builders that we do business with, and they're buying up land for things, you know, developments that they won't start for 5 years. So yeah, we do that. Yes, ma'am.
Do you do apartment loans?
Yeah, we have a lot of multifamily, you know, properties that we've done. You know, some A properties, B properties, and yeah, we actually have a property management company that has some of the C-class properties. We don't do a lot of that, and there's a reason why we do that, because the owner has got really, really deep pockets with a lot of cash. So, but yeah, multifamily is an important space for us right now. Yes, sir.
In regards to the EOS, how do you get everyone else to buy into it?
Well, that's a really good question, Marty. And it's really easy when your CEO says you're going to do it, right? You start with that point. But I think, as is with anything, you have to start with the why. You have to explain why it is you're doing it. And then once people can understand the why behind it, you've got a much greater chance for them getting on board with it. And really, once you lay out this model and you explain this is why we're doing it, and let me show you the pieces of it, it's like the light bulb goes off and people say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I will tell you, when we first started this, and the meeting, they call them the L10 meeting. That's the weekly meeting, and they suggest you do it every week. When we first started this, we had acquired a bank that was out of Denver, Colorado, and that bank had employed the EOS model. And so it was our local, our regional leadership started this, and we were all grumbling. All right, we understand the why, but are you kidding me? A weekly meeting, an hour to an hour and a half, what value is there in that? We got deals we got to go get done. But ironically enough, the president of that bank out there said, I know you guys, this sounds foolish, but I'm just telling you, you're going to find that this time goes by fast, and it is time well spent. Because you're identifying the issues that you got to deal with, you're talking about the rocks that are an impediment to you achieving your goals, and it helps you stay on track and keep pushing forward, right? And only then, again, if you don't know where you're going, you're going to end up someplace else, right? And so you've got to be planning, and you've got to know where you're going to go. And so once you spent the time explaining it, it's like, okay. And so now we had a meeting this morning. We actually almost ran over a little bit long, but because we had so much to cover. So, but it starts with the why.
Talk to us a little bit about the meetings, because a lot of us hate meetings because they're a waste of time. But
Yep.
within this system,
You start on time, you end on time, you have an agenda, and you stick to it. You don't go off track. So when we're talking about rocks, so in my meeting, there are 6 of us in the meeting. And all 6 of us have identified our rocks, what we're going to deal with. And part of the agenda is, to talk about your rocks. And you don't go in and you don't discuss all the different rocks, right? Are you on track or are you off track? And if you're literally, I'm on track of all your different rocks, right? And so then the bulk of the meeting is for the issues, the IDS part, issues, discuss, and solve. Because that's the noise that gets in your way that you got to deal with, right? And so you got to identify what they are. Our bank is about to go through a merger with another bank. And so a lot of what we talked about today is what are some of these issues, right? The bank that we're merging with maybe doesn't have the same philosophy that we've had as it relates to lending to high net worth individuals, for example. So we talked about that. That's an issue. Okay, let's discuss it. What are the issues and what are our people saying? And that we might not be able to solve that problem right now, but so what those issues do, they can come up and become a rock, and then somebody needs to deal with that rock. So again, we've got a weekly agenda. Stick very closely to that agenda, and get through it. But most of the meeting is spent on the IDS part. Yes, sir.
Someone with employees, do you help your employees with those rocks throughout the week,
Well,
throughout the month?
yeah, yes, but you have to give the employees, they need to take ownership of their rocks, right? Because they're not your rocks, they're their rocks. You all know where you're going, right? Because you know where you want to be at the end of 1 year. And everybody is on that same path. They all know where they're going. And so everybody has, and part of the people is, you've got to identify what everybody's role is. The right people in the right seats. That's part of the EOS model, right? And so making sure everybody has a very clear understanding of what their job is and what their role is, and then how they are contributing to the goal, the 1 year, the 3 year, the 10-year goal, right? And so they know what their jobs are, and they have to be able to identify what rocks can get in their way to, because they all have goals too, right? All my bankers have goals. And so they have to identify what are their rocks to be able to achieve their goals. For one, for a lender, it might be, XYZ bank down the street, right, is doing some stupid things. Well, we can't solve for that, right? But it is a rock, and okay, so what do we got to do? They have to be able to identify it. So I have to submit my rocks to my boss, and my people, they send their rocks to me, and I will tell you that I got some rocks, and when I got them from one of my presidents, I said, okay, let's look at these rocks together, and how is, if you've identified these rocks, how is that going to help you achieve your goals at the end of the year? Because they weren't really related to where we were wanting to go, and so he's like, oh, you're exactly right. So he identified his rocks, but it wasn't helping us get to where we needed to go at the end of the year.
Great answer. But my little leader.
Yeah.
But if someone doesn't have those rocks ready, what do you necessarily do with them?
Well, you have to ask, I guess as a leader, you got to ask yourself the question, are they the right people? Right? And so if they're the right people, you've got to invest in them. You've got to coach them, right? You've got to empower them. Our bank is also a Gallup-based organization, right? And so, every year we take a survey of 12 questions. And do they have the right tools and equipment they need? There's 12 questions, right? Is there somebody invested in their development? And so I think those are the questions that you have to ask. Are they the right people? Right? And if they're not, then you got to make some tough decisions. Either you got to train them up to get them to where they need to be, or you need to help them find something where they can be more useful.
Thank you.
You bet. Yes, sir.
If someone wanted to get a meeting with the loan committee, what kinds of things would you present to the loan committee to help drive the point across, what you're looking at?
Well, again, that's the banker's job, the lender's job is to, and so we've got a process that we go through at our institution. We got a meeting tomorrow morning. It's a high-level discussion. Here's the broad overview of the loan. But again, it gets back to understanding the transaction, right? Understanding the people, right? And the first thing that I do as a banker, and Gary kind of talked about it, is what are the weaknesses? I look for what are the weaknesses of the credit? What are the challenges that we're going to run into, right? What are the problems that we need to deal with? And then what are the mitigants to those issues? So as a banker, you have to understand what is the risk and what is the mitigant to those risks. And every deal is different. And so again, every loan is a different set of circumstances, and you have to look at it and understand it. Matter of fact, I'll give you an idea. We're talking tomorrow about a senior housing project. It's a $10 million deal, being acquired by a group that has done it for many years. Right now, this deal doesn't cash flow, right? But they've bought it, and they've got a number of the units that need to be repaired. So part of it is this loan opportunity for us is to refinance the debt that they've got with another bank, and then provide them some additional capital to go renovate some of the rooms. So the risk is, number one, it's not cash flowing, but we've got some guarantors on this loan that they have significant liquidity, and so we'll build into the covenant package that they maintain a certain level of liquidity as a backstop to the loan. Because when you go in, you look at it, you think, why would any bank make this loan? Well, number one, these people that we're doing business with, we've known them for a long time. They've done this for a long time. They've got a lot of experience in this space. They know what they're doing because they've done it before. And this property's located in a good area, and they've got a good plan. So anyway, I don't know if I answered your question, because every deal is different. But we have to first, like I said, identify the risks. What are the risks involved in making the loan, and can you mitigate that risk enough to be comfortable with making the loan? And that includes building a covenant package so you can track it and follow it. and monitor the loan, be able to get back as a lender. I want to be able to get back and sit down with the borrower, you know, if things get off kilter a little bit. And as Gary said, you know, his banker said, well, we got to get through this together, you know, because we're not real estate folks, right? We know enough, but, you know, or if it's we're not running businesses, we're lending money to people that are running businesses. And so you got to get through it all. Quick story, and then I'll stop. But at my previous stop, I was the manager of the commercial corporate banking group of this bank, and we had over $1 billion in loans. And we had a company, that well-known company, many of you probably would have heard of them, successful, been a customer of the bank for over 20 years. And they had a bad year. And we had covenants, and they defaulted on some of their covenants. And so, you know, we had to have some very difficult conversations. And I'll never forget, my credit folks that were located in a different city said, we need to turn this over to special assets and we need to work them out of the bank. What? They've been customers for 20 years. Why would we turn our back on them now? And I said, we're not going to turn it over to special assets. I will work with the client. So I went down, sat down and talked to them, and had a very difficult conversation. And the owner, who was not really all that involved with the business, was at that meeting. And I said, you know, I want to know what your plan is to turn this around. And they had a plan. And first of all, they admitted that they took their eye off the ball. They got involved in some other things, took their eye off the ball. And so I said, look, we're your partner. We're going to work through this with you. And I'll never forget, my special assets guy, I came after my first meeting with them, I went back and told the special assets guy, I said, here's how the meeting went. I told him we're their partner. And he said, what? You said, what? I said, well, I just told them that we're their banking partners. Don't ever use that term again. We're their bank. We're not their partner. And I knew what he meant, right? Remember, he's the guy that wanted to kick him out of the bank. But the fact is, they did turn it around, and, you know, very successful company. Sometimes companies have bad years, but if you know who you're lending money to as a banker, then, you know, it starts with character, kind of going back to what I talked about. Did that answer your question at all? Bankers have a tendency to talk around subjects sometimes. You never know what the heck they're saying, so. Well, I got these handouts. If any of you want them, feel free to take them. I got plenty copies. But anyway, I hope that some of it was useful. You all are obviously, I'm sure, very successful people. Again, you know, we talk about it all the time. You got to have a bunch of tools in your toolbox, right, to be able to do what you do and do it really well. This is just another tool that you might be able to use that might be helpful to you. So anyway, appreciate the time. Thank you.